Welcome into the ESPN Aussie Hoops Hour podcast, and the off-season talk is in the rear vision mirror. NBL 26 is here, and we're very excited for a massive first week of games in NBL 26. Olgun Ulic is going to be here in just a moment, and we've got a bunch of topics to get through today, including that opener. What one thing that we are looking for from Melbourne and Tasmania, the opening game. We're also going to get to some of our intriguing players to watch, maybe just a little bit under the radar. And of course, Olgun, he's got news at espn.com.au. He's got a story on the Cairns Taipans, so we're going to get to that as well. My name's Kane Pittman. Joining me, as he will every single Tuesday, Olgun Ulic is here. And you can find all his work at espn.com.au. And if you haven't yet reviewed or rated the podcast, please do so wherever you're listening, or of course on YouTube, where the production value, Olgun, last week just bumped up a whole heap. Maybe I need to upgrade the Wi-Fi, but we're working on that. It's fantastic to see you. And hey, I'm in Australia. We're not in the same city, but we are closer as the season is here.
Man, the one time you're in Australia, you're in Sydney. I'm from Sydney. Ordinarily, I live in Sydney. I'll be based in Sydney this season. And I just happen to be in Melbourne because there's a lot going on here. So it sucks that I haven't been able to see you yet. But I am as excited as anybody for the season. I even realized that I took out a piece of paper from my bag to do some notes. Yes. And it's a box score from the Blitz. So I have a feeling that I'll be doing versions of this over the course of the season, just miscellaneous box scores to do notes on.
That's cool. We don't want to go back to the Blitz, though. Everyone's over that. We are moving to the start of this, and the season does start with the season open, Melbourne United and Tassie Jack Jumpers. And Olgun, here's the thing. We spoke about the Hoops Fest last year, and I was like, why are you playing the grand final rematch in Perth? Can we get this to start the season? The NBL, many would say, including me, 12 months behind on this. This should have been the season opener last year, but two teams that have got a healthy rivalry. So let's get going with one thing that you were looking forward to from this opener, Melbourne and Tassie.
So the thing that I like are these bigs. Will McVeigh versus Jesse Edwards. These are probably two of the more athletic bigs in the NBL. Jesse Edwards is someone who's come in. He's looked huge. The United played a preseason game against the Brisbane Bullets. He made Tyrell Harrison look little. So Jesse Edwards is someone who's planning to dunk everything. He's a lob threat. You'll see Milton Doyle, Tyson Walker, and Shea Ely just throw the ball up there with the hopes that this guy maybe will go and get it and throw it down. So him against Will McVeigh, someone who will have zero reservations about trying to block this guy at the rim. That is the matchup I'm excited for. The two athletic bigs going up against each other, the two lob threats. Yes, Milton Doyle return is cool, and you can hit on that. But I'm out here to see the athletic bigs go at it.
I think we've reached an intriguing sort of period in the NBL, because I do think even if you just go back a couple of years ago, and this is a trend worldwide in basketball, Olgs, where everyone is going small. And okay, let's see your version in the NBL version of Draymond Green that can play the five and guard 1 through 5, and everyone can switch. And I'm kind of curious to see what it looks like in the NBL this season. The two guys that you mentioned, but obviously you bring in JaVale McGee, and I do think across the league, the 7-footers maybe making a little bit of a comeback, and we get a little taste of that in the opener.
I mean, look at the NBA. Look at the playoffs. All these teams going to two big lineups. Look at the Illawarra Hawks. They've decided to go really, really big. JaVale McGee, then when Sam Froling comes back, they've got two elite bigs right there. Look at the Adelaide 36ers. Last season, they had two bigs. They decided to run it back. A lot of teams have decided to go bigger because you can go small in stretches. We saw this with Sydney Kings last season. You can go small in stretches, but there are times, especially situationally, where you're going to need bigs on the floor. The Illawarra Hawks, they had Sam Froling and Lockie Olbrich last season. You need bigs out there, quality bigs, even if it's just situational. So I like that teams are leaning more into it. If you have that big point of difference, it can really change a lot of stuff that you can do out there.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think we have heard from some of the coaches already, whether it be through the preseason and the Blitz, and you've been there. We've had Justin Tatum on Nothing But Net Aussie Hoops last week, and he discussed the value that he thinks JaVale McGee can bring to that Illawarra Hawks team. So I think it's a pretty good matchup that you've highlighted there in this season opener. You hit on Milton Doyle. So this, to me, is the most intriguing thing from this matchup, because he should be loved forever in Tasmania, right? This is a guy that helped them win a title. He's a guy that hit big shot after big shot after big shot. And I know Jack McVeigh was the guy in the NBL Championship Series when they went all the way. But Milton Doyle, the understated assassin for that Jack Jumpers team, he's really hard not to like. But we also know that this Tasmania crowd is parochial as any. And I know we are in this sort of era where you can't boo anyone. But look, if you go from a Tasmania Jack Jumpers team, even if you are a hero for this team winning a title, and you decide to go to the absolute rival, perhaps the biggest rival that they've got in the whole entire league, I'm expecting it to be a little bit hostile. And I'm also expecting Milton Doyle perhaps to have just a little chip on his shoulder, because we discussed it last year, 14.6 points per game. He's a better player than this. He had 10 games where he was 10 points or fewer, 36% from the field, 32% from the three-point line. He's significantly better than that. And I thought we saw his efficiency get much better when he went overseas in the NBL offseason, continued to play. I think we saw some nice moments from him in the preseason with Melbourne United. So I think he's going to have a great season overall. It doesn't necessarily mean everything this first game, but I do think that it'll be a little bit emotional. And I'm curious to see these Tassie fans, how they respond to Milt the Stilt.
Kane, these Tassie fans, I was in the building when they were booing Matthew
Yeah,
Dellavedova,
that's right.
Australian legend, four-time Olympian, right? So they will boo. But I've also seen this Tassie crowd welcome home players with open arms. Will they do that with their superstar guard who went to join a team that they have faced in the championship series before? I don't know the answer to that. My guess is that there will be a very kind reception for Milton Doyle. I think that the reception for Milton Doyle around the league is maybe a little bit understated, to the point where he's becoming underrated at this point. This guy is an elite player in the NBL. When I spoke with Jack McVeigh last week, he told me that Jack Jumpers team, yeah, Jack hit the big shots, but that was Milton's team. That was unequivocally Milton Doyle's team. And so this is someone who is a really high-level player in the NBL. He's effectively going to be United's point guard. And again, this is someone who can go and average 18, 6, and 6 at the blink of an eye. And I think we wouldn't be surprised by that. So I'm excited for the return. Milton Doyle versus Bryce Hamilton will be really intriguing. It'll be the person who once was in Tasmania versus their new 3-level scorer, who I think we're all expecting to be really high level. So that's a matchup as well. Not just the return of Milton, but Milton versus Bryce. Let's see the comparison.
Yeah, just so everyone knows it at home, just the way that we're working with this podcast this year. We did say it last week that we're trying to compact this thing a little bit. Now, we're working with a system here where there's a chat up here, and our wonderful team in the US will say, all right, wrap up the conversation and move on. And I'm just going to say that Olgun is just working through some teething issues of talking and also looking at the chat at the same time. And he gets the rap message, and 4 minutes later, he's still banging on. But we are going to move on. I am looking forward to the season opener with Melbourne and the Tassie Jack Jumpers. But let's move on to the Cairns Taipans. They've been one of the buzz teams of the offseason for good reason. They're able to bring back Adam Ford, such a big key piece, the head coach for this team. But then also some big name recruits, and Jack McVeigh is at the top of that. You have got a story coming on ESPN.com.au. So what you got?
Yeah, I spoke with Jack last week, and the idea of the story, we spoke about everything. We spoke about why he chose Cairns. We spoke about the pressure of being the guy on a team, which is something he hasn't really done before. But primarily the story is about what he wants to do and what he knows he has to do to get back to the NBA. He has spoken to GMs. He has received all the feedback of what he needs to do to get back there. He was on a two-way with the Houston Rockets. What does he need to do? They tell him, offensively, you are an NBA player. You are unequivocally an NBA player. And Kane, you and I sat next to each other at Summer League. We see how gifted this guy is just as a natural scorer. It's on the defensive end where he knows he needs to get better. And so he's playing next to Admiral Schofield in Cairns. He told me he wants to learn from him, see how he can sit down and guard on the perimeter a little bit better. And there's also a distributing element to his game that he wants to improve. So there are little areas that he knows he has to get better at, and he knows that Cairns will give him the opportunity to do so. But the NBA is still right there. That is his dream. He wants to be there next season. And the story is just on what he feels he needs to do to get back
he's
there.
29 years old. And I do think, you look at the way the NBA recruits. It's not to say that's impossible that he gets back there, but it certainly does feel like the odds would be against him getting back there and having a real rotation-based NBA career. But the one thing that we know about Jack McVeigh, based on what we've seen over the last 3 years, he has been a guy that it probably developed a little bit later, and he's discussed whether it was a lot of the off-court stuff and the mental stuff that came into that. And he is probably as mentally locked in almost as any player in the league in terms of being in tune with what he does need to get better at. So while I would sit here and say that I don't really expect that next year he'll be playing in the NBA, I'm sure that he would listen to that and go, yeah, but people didn't think I was going to be a key piece of an NBL championship team. People didn't think I was going to get to the NBA in the first place. People certainly didn't think I was going to go to the Paris Olympics. So the idea that the odds might be against Jack McVeigh is kind of something, a position that he feels pretty comfortable in. And this Cairns Taipans team have got weapons that I would argue that he hasn't really played alongside, even with those Tassie teams offensively. When you think of Rain Smith and Admiral Schofield, that's going to play a lot of his minutes at the three. So two through four, they got a pretty nice rotation there. I think they're going to be one of the more entertaining teams in the league. I'm not sure whether they're a true contender right now. I think they're going to have to fit a lot of pieces together, but I think they're going to be highly entertaining. And they did just sign or have a little import swap at the guard position. Andrew Andrews comes in, and Olgun, my question: do you think he's going to be a good import?
I'll ignore it. I'll ignore it. Look, Andrew Andrews.
I know everyone was laughing at home. They got more than a handful of chuckles.
It absolutely did, and that makes me mad at the world. Look, Andrew Andrews comes in. It was for a multitude of reasons. One, Ashton Hagans. Initially, there were some visa issues with Ashton Hagans, who was the point guard they initially signed. He played in China recently, so the visa that you need to get is more difficult once you play in China because there's a different sort of medical you need to get. There were complications there. There was a personal issue that Ashton Hagans did deal with, and then it got to a point where it feels a little bit complicated to keep trying to bring this guy in. And then Sam Wardenberg went down with what looks like an ankle injury that's going to keep him out for an extended period of time. So I think Adam Ford realized, man, if we don't have Sam Wardenberg, do we need Hagans, this sort of set the table defensive dog of a point guard, or do we need more scoring firepower? And Andrew Andrews is someone who absolutely brings scoring firepower. He's a wet piece. He's an elite shooter. So I think they needed to not just replace Hagans because there were some complications there, but there was also a need that needed to be filled, and Andrew Andrews is that guy.
So he's in his early 30s. As we just a little brief background, I was doing some research over the last few days, and this is a man that's played in Lithuania, Spain, Greece, Turkey, Israel, Latvia, played in the G League, and now he's out in Australia. So well-traveled, and certainly a guy that has had success right across the world. All right, this is a topic that I was really fascinated in, Olgun, and it was a player that as I look at the rundown, I framed it a player that you want to keep an eye on, which is disappointing to me because I wanted to frame this as an under-the-radar player. So I've messed up here because I was going to absolutely launch on you for your player, but no spoilers there. I'll go to my guy first, and we're giving some love to our friends in New Zealand because I do think, perhaps rightfully so, they feel like they get left out. You got the Australian media, and they kind of just push New Zealand to the side. I would argue that you got to win some more games if you want the attention, because if we go back to the Derek Pardon team and the Jarrell Brantley and Will McDowell White was balling out there, we were talking about them every single show because they were awesome. They just haven't been that good over the last few years. But I think my player to watch is going to be Sam Menenga. And I really think that he can have a breakout season. I was pretty critical last year of the Breakers bringing in Taco Fall. I didn't think it made any sense. I know it probably got people into the arena, and I know he could block some shots, and he was really a force under the basket, but he was also foul prone. He also changed everything that you had to do defensively, and it forced New Zealand to play one way when Taco Fall was on the floor, and then another way when he was on the bench. And so I just thought that it completely messed up the rhythm of this team. But Menenga last year, around 12 points, 5 rebounds. In the Blitz in 2 games, 19.7 rebounds. We saw him have some nice moments at the Asia Cup as well. He's 23 years of age. He had 25-point games at near double-doubles last year. He's highly skillful around the basket. I think that his outside shot has continued to improve. And I think with this guard star duo that they have with Brockington and PJC, I think they could form a nice connection. And I think by the end of the season, I'm not saying he's going to be an all-NBL guy or anything like that, but I wouldn't be surprised if we get to the end of the season and Menenga's a 17-point guy, 8 rebounds per game. I think he could have a big season.
Yeah, Menenga's coming off a big season in Puerto Rico as well. You look at what this Breakers lineup is, and yeah, it's Parker Jackson Cutright and Isaiah Brockington, but I like the front court. There's versatility in Sam Menenga and Rob Baker II. So those two working alongside each other, they can both play inside and out. And the thing to remember with Menenga is that it's a contract year for him. He's still on his rookie contract. He was sort of traded from the Taipans to the Breakers, did an extension. So it's still effectively his rookie contract. So he's seeing all these other bigs around the league get giant deals. and he wants to be part of that party. I saw Menenga work out a little bit in Melbourne. He was here a couple of weeks ago, did some runs with some of the guys at courtside, and he looked at the level. He looked the part against some of the NBA guys. So he physically he's there. I think the skill set is there. This is the biggest opportunity that he'll ever have. And it's a contract year for him, and he absolutely knows that.
Yeah, look at the numbers. Go through the game log from last year. He had a pretty nice start to the season. And I know it sounds like I'm just picking on Taco Fall, but he came in, all of a sudden Menenga's coming off the bench. The rhythm was just completely messed up. He's got a free run in it now. He knows that he's going to play 20 to 25 minutes per game, and he's got a chance to really have that breakout season. And to your point, earn some serious cash. So I'm watching the Breakers, people in New Zealand. I'm watching Sam Menenga, and I think he's going to have a big year. Now, as I said, I'm a little disappointed in myself because I didn't say an under-the-radar guy, because your name is certainly not under the radar. But who are you looking at this season?
Yeah, my guy is very on top of the
On the
radar,
radar.
and on a team that I think very very on the radar, and the team that everyone's going to watch is Jalen
Yep.
Galloway, and it's because it's so intriguing. Him coming off an elite FIBA Asia Cup performance where he won him, shot the absolute lights out. We didn't realize that he could shoot the ball at that level, but he was also athletically the best player on the floor. He looked like the best player on the floor basically at all times in every game the Boomers played. And that was a Boomers team that had Xavier Cooks and Jack McVeigh and Will Magnay. Jalen Galloway was the player that stood out. He joins this Sydney team. I'm hopeful that Matthew Dellavedova can maximize him. I'm hopeful that Brian Goorjian and Andrew Bogut can lock heads and figure out ways to put Galloway in positions to succeed. And then I'm looking at just the general rotation. I think Jalen Galloway should start. I think he's earned that. You've got Bull Kuol as someone who's sort of right there, could also potentially start. And you wonder, I look forward to next year where Jalen Galloway, he's got 2 years left on his contract. Bull Kuol has a mutual option next year. So I wonder, just politically, do you lean into the guy who you're for sure going to have next year, unless he gets an NBA deal, but you're for sure going to have Jalen Galloway contracted? I don't know if the Kings are going to pick up Bull Kuol's mutual option. So you have every reason to play, not just play Jalen Galloway, but to try to maximize him and turn him into a star. Because if he looks 80% of what he looked like at the Asia Cup, then this Sydney Kings team transforms into something that I don't think we even think that they're going to be.
Hey, I know me and you both had conversations with Brian Goorjian last year or over the last 2 years, and Galloway was a name that he just kept on mentioning as well. As we move on, kind of an interesting sliding doors moment as well. Galloway misses that whole season last year. Alex Tui, I'm not saying that he got more minutes because Galloway was out, but he was able to really be a key piece and sort of defensively show out. He gets to the NBA,
100% did.
and then Jalen Galloway now has his chance. So I think it's interesting. The Kings never short on talent, Olgs, and the Perth Wildcats have not been short on talent at the guard spot, particularly the point guard, the shooting guard, the combo guard, whatever you want to call it, because they've had a 5-time MVP to just lock into that rotation last year. And we discussed the idea of Mason Jones last week, and I certainly said, you probably want to come in hot if you're Mason Jones, because the Red Army will, look, they're going to be putting the pressure on, and they want to see you ball out from the start. And the first time they got to look at him, 22 points, 7 assists, 7 to 10 from 3. He scored, he facilitated, he looked like a bucket as advertised. We've seen all the highlights from what he's done in the G League, a highly, highly productive athlete. But this could not have gone any better for those Wildcats fans, believing that they've swapped one MVP for another MVP caliber guy.
Yeah, Mason Jones did exactly what we figured he'd do. This is what his resume dictated. He is an extremely productive guy in the G League over the past couple of seasons, but beyond that, he was also extremely efficient. The three ball is his elite skill. He's not just plus 40%, he's well over 40% from three over the past couple of seasons in the G League. Obviously won a G League championship and won the G League Finals MVP. So he's credentialed, he's really talented. And I'm curious the combination between him and Ben Henschel, because Mason Jones is someone who really excels on the ball. I think he would have had 5 or 6 potential assists in this game just from guys missing open looks. So guys around him are going to get open looks. If he can maximize Ben Henschel, then that could be a really potent backcourt for the Perth Wildcats. But look, Mason Jones, he's someone who can go and average 20 points and 8 rebounds.
Yeah, Doolittle, JLA, I think they're going to love it as well, because we keep talking about the scoring because it just stands out to you. But we've seen historically from his numbers at the G League, he's always been a 7 to 9 assist per game guy. Like, he will facilitate and he will find the gaps. And yeah, Ryan Brockhoff, the beauty of working alongside Ryan Brockhoff all the time is that he goes to the film room and he breaks down the tape. And we saw some of the highlights. If you're watching this podcast on YouTube, you would have seen some of the highlights from that first preseason game. And one of the things that Ryan pointed out straight away, if he's going left, beware. He's going to try to get to that step back and he's going to knock down that three. If he's going right, a lot of times that he'll get downhill and he can either get to that mid-range, that floater game, or he can facilitate. So those are the types of questions that he asks. He's not locked down to one side of the floor, incredibly talented. And I think he's going to have a big start to the season, hopefully for the Red Army, who might put a little bit of pressure on him. Now, Olgun, Josh Giddey, this was a conversation that we were talking about for a long time, the restricted free agency, and the fact that timing is everything if you are in that restricted free agency bracket. Historically, if you fall in a year where a bunch of teams have cap space, you're probably going to be able to get something done because there's going to be a bidding war for your services. That just was not the case with the Chicago Bulls. They pushed back and forth. We heard reports that are sort of starting around the $80 million mark. Bobby Marks then reported from ESPN that the Bulls came to the party and said, how about 488? But it always felt, everything that you talked about, everything you heard, they wanted to get to that $100 million mark, and ultimately signs a 4-year, $100 million contract. A nice extension for him. He doesn't have to play for that qualifying offer around 11, 12 mil. Life-changing money for the family and ultimately good business, and really sets him up now to launch into the big part of his career.
It was really fascinating negotiation because it seemed like both parties wanted to get something done, but both parties sort of entered the situation with no real leverage. Obviously, there were no teams out there who were going to give Giddey an offer sheet, so he couldn't say, "Hey, this team wants me for $35 million. Meet me in the middle." And the Bulls, what were they going to do in this situation? They wanted him back. They didn't want to risk the idea of him taking the qualifying offer and then becoming an unrestricted free agent. The idea of basically trading Caruso straight up for Giddey and then ultimately getting nothing in return for that long term, that would have sucked for the Bulls. And so ultimately that little bit of leverage on each side, which is the potential of Giddey taking that QO and the Bulls saying, all right, are you going to risk this year? Basically they met in the middle. And so 25 a year over 4 years is a reasonable middle ground. And I don't know if there's a situation where this is a better outcome for both player and team. It feels like a team-friendly contract and a player-friendly contract. It feels like they ultimately, after a little dance, they met in the middle, and this ended up being a really healthy negotiation.
It's a hilarious conversation to have, but I was thinking about this as this continued to go on, and we're battling between 85 mil and 100 mil, and I'm sitting back and I'm just like, and I understand why people sit at home and go, this is the most ridiculous conversation of all time. Like, when you're earning $80+ million, secure the long-term future. But the reality is in the NBA that even $100 million or $25 million per year, it's not, it's kind of just the going rate. If you want to be a starting point guard in the NBA, that's what you earn. And if we do look at the back end of the season, this is where timing comes into it. If you're going to, for the last 2 months of the season after the All-Star break, average 21 points, 10 rebounds, 10 assists, shoot the ball 45% from three on 4.5 attempts per game, like nice volume. And that's what everyone has asked him to do. Shoot the ball, improve there. There's still question marks. And he didn't get paid like a superstar. That's the reality. But if you're the Bulls, to your point, Olgs, if they said, no, look, just come back for the qualifying offer, not only would they risk losing an asset in Josh Giddey that they traded Alex Caruso for, they would want to retain that asset that they traded, that key piece that went to OKC. They also risk the idea that with all the guards that they have that need to get paid next season, whether it's Kobe White and Dosunmu and go down the list, a young core that they're going to have to figure out what pieces are in their long-term future. If all of a sudden you allow Josh Giddey to play this season and he has 18 points and 8 assists, 8 rebounds, and averages, high 30s from three, then he's probably going to come back to you and say, well, now with these other teams with cap space, instead of signing me for 100 mil last offseason, now my going rate is 150. So I think for all parties, it just made sense to get here as we look to wrap this up. And ultimately, you just got to feel good for him, Olgun, because his stock really dropped when he was traded from OKC. And I'm happy for him that he's in a place now where he has secured his future.
Yeah, look, he did what the Bulls would have wanted him to do. The Bulls would have said, come here, do this, average a certain amount, shoot the ball at a high level. And he did that. And ultimately, look, he's what is he, like 15% of the salary cap going forward? That's such a reasonable number for someone who is ostensibly your starting point guard for the future. Again, this is such a good outcome for both sides. Super reasonable.
Yes, you got to feel good for Josh Giddey. And I was curious what Dyson Daniels was thinking, as he's probably 12 months out from a payday himself, and hopefully another big year for Dyson Daniels. And maybe he had the breakout 1 year earlier, winning that Most Improved Player award. So we're going to keep an eye on those negotiations and what that looks like with the Hawks team that I think is going to be on the rise. But that's going to do it for today on the ESPN Aussie Hoops Hour podcast. Olgun, I didn't really get a chance to have a crack at you today. Your Jalen Galloway take ultimately was a pretty good one. And I know you'll be traveling everywhere, so my message to Australian basketball fans, if you see Olgun out there on the court, his feet will be on the hardwood. This man does not see it anywhere beyond row one. Say hello to him and let him know what you thought about his takes on today's show. But make sure you keep up with all his news on espn.com.au. Make sure you watch Nothing But Net Aussie Hoops Thursday night on ESPN, or find it on Disney+. And rate and review this podcast and get involved in the comments session. We want to hear from you all. Olgun, you're a star. We'll see you next week. And maybe we can find ourselves in the same city. Thanks for listening, everyone.